The Xfinity 5-year price guarantee. You get 5 years of the most reliable Wi-Fi with our best equipment included for a price that stays exactly the same.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Alongside Jeff McLane, I am Olivia Reiner. We are coming at you live from the Lincoln Financial Field press box, getting set for the Eagles' home opener against the Dallas Cowboys. Jeff, it has been a long time coming since week one. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, I'm excited to finally talk about real football, write about real football, and get to the regular season. I'm sure I don't sound overly excited, Olivia. Maybe I'm just kind of showing my grizzled old reporter bones here. But yeah, we got a game to write about and talk about, and let's get to it.
Absolutely. Just one thing quickly, everyone. You can always be a part of our conversation. We want to hear from you. If you're over on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, you can leave us a comment, a question in the chat, and we can answer some of those in real time. Also, if you're over on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, leave us a comment down in the blog, and we will answer those questions too. So we look forward to you being a part of our chat and of all of these discussions that we always have here on Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. All right, Jeff, let's talk about the big burning question going into this season. The Eagles are coming off of a huge Super Bowl win. We're going to see them raise the banner here in just a little bit. Eagles, of course, will not be out on the sideline for that presentation. They were not out on the sideline back in 2018 either. Listen, this is a team with a lot of continuity, but some big changes to this team. We saw a lot of particularly defensive players leave in free agency, players like Darius Slay, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Of course, neither of those players actually left in free agency. We saw Slay was cut, C.J. Gardner-Johnson was traded, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat left in free agency, Brandon Graham retired. So this is a very different defense coming into this season. This is a younger team compared to last season. Jeff, you were obviously on the beat back in 2018 when the Eagles were coming off of their first Super Bowl win. When you think of how this team is positioned, the way that they have retooled the group, remodeled the group in the offseason compared to the last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl and were coming off of that, how do these teams compare? Do you think this team is better positioned coming off of a Super Bowl win than the last team, or are they a little bit worse off? How do you look at it?
Yeah, I think that they're better if you're looking at the roster. I know you just mentioned all the changes on the defensive side of the ball, but they've had success in drafting replacements. Now, some of them, there's a little bit of wishing when it comes to how they'll perform in the starting role, and we'll see a few of those guys out there today. But there is certainly talent returning at key positions. Jaylen Carter, Zach Bond, who they brought back in free agency. It didn't allow him to leave in free agency and re-signed him to a new contract. You drafted good cornerbacks in Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, and Eagles expect greater things out of them. And the offensive side of the ball, they're returning the entire offense save for one person. So when you look at the roster, they're much better. They're much better situated there than they were in 2018. I think the bigger changes, though, the bigger differences are quarterback. One, they didn't have the uncertainty about whether Carson Wentz was going to be ready by the start of the season. They didn't even know how he would perform coming off the knee injury. And in fact, he didn't end up performing nearly anywhere close to the way he performed in 2017. So that was an issue coming into the season. Plus, he didn't even play in the first two games. I mean, Jalen Hurts is coming off an MVP performance in the Super Bowl. I know there are questions about consistency and how he may perform with a lot of the attention being on Saquon Barkley this season and how he runs the ball. And the other big difference to me is just at the head coach position. Nick Sirianni, I don't want to take anything away from Doug Peterson. He has a Lombardi trophy and wears a Super Bowl ring and was the first one to do so for the Eagles as head coach. But I think Nick's a lifer. I think Nick is always kind of looking at ways to improve with each season. I think he thoughtfully approached the offseason and how he could change things up and improve and keep trying to win championships. Now, are they going to win a championship? We don't know, but we will find out soon enough.
Well, let's talk about some of those changes on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to see a number of new starters out there for the Eagles tonight at outside cornerback, at safety, and at inside linebacker. Cornerback and safety being the result of some changes. Inside linebacker being the result of Nakobe Dean still dealing with a knee injury as he works his way back and started the season there on PUP. Let's start with corner, especially, as we mentioned earlier, Slay gone. We saw a big competition this offseason throughout training camp for that vacant spot between Keely Ringo and Adoree Jackson. And then we saw a late addition in Jacorian Bennett, who was acquired during training camp from the Las Vegas Raiders. At the moment, we are expecting Adoree Jackson to make that start. This is a guy who has been in the NFL for a very long time, played last season and for a few seasons with the New York Giants. But what's notable about his season last year with the Giants is that he was not a full-time starter. Jeff, when you look at Jackson and the capabilities that he brings to the position, how do you think he is going to fare, not only really in the short term, but do you think he is the long-term option there for them at cornerback?
I don't know. From what I understand, he will start tonight, and they're moving forward with him as the starter. Now, Jacorian Bennett, I think that there's still competition on a week-to-week basis, which you typically don't want in season, but because there is the uncertainty there, and there had been throughout most of training camp, I think this could be a week-to-week thing. It depends how Adoree performs. Now, Adoree has a lot of starts under his belt. He has done it at a fairly high level over his career. But as Vic Fangio said during camp, this is his chance to prove that, he can be what he was drafted to be. And I guess that was a little bit of a knock at him, but I guess, we saw that in camp because he didn't really put a stranglehold on the position. In fact, Keely Ringo was in the running for quite a while, which I think surprised me, quite frankly. But now we're seeing that Ringo really isn't really factoring into the spot. So we'll see how that pans out. It will be interesting to see how the Cowboys attack Adoree Jackson. George Pickens was brought in to take some of the load off CeeDee Lamb, and he has obviously take the roof off the top capabilities. And I think that's an area that we should focus on heading into this game.
So Adoree Jackson is not the only player that is new to the Eagles defense that is expected to start in tonight's game. We've got Jahad Campbell potentially starting at inside linebacker, the rookie. We'll see if he is the one to win that job out over Jeremiah Trotter Jr., another strong contender in training camp. And then Sidney Brown expected to start at safety alongside Reed Blankenship. He was battling for that job in camp with Drew Makuba, who really suffered due to injury this training camp. He dealt with one early in camp, and then towards the end, he sustained a hamstring injury. So it's been a tough time for him getting acclimated to the NFL game simply because he hasn't gotten nearly as many reps as Brown has. But given everything we know about this defense, the new faces that are in there, Jeff, how do you feel about this defense as a whole, the retooled group, and not only how they're going to fare in this game tonight against the Cowboys, but just also long-term compared to just the dominance they were able to find last season?
Yeah, you have question marks. We talked about the average age of the group being below 25. I think in certain packages it may be below 24. That's very young. You mentioned Campbell. He'll start it inside linebacker. And I don't think that we'll see a package for Jeremiah Trotter. I just feel like Vic Fangio at that position, especially, he wants the two guys there the whole time. Now at safety, there's probably going to be a little more of a rotation, and Drew Makuba will be there in some form. I expect Sidney Brown to start. And whether it's just Makuba playing in the dime and then they move him to safety and they have Sidney Brown down in the box in kind of that role, I don't know. They can shuffle guys around when you have 6 defensive backs out there. But I think there's a chance that you'll see Drew kind of splitting that role with Sidney Brown a little bit, because I don't know if they completely trust Sidney. Let's be honest. It seemed like before the second injury to Drew Makuba, the hamstring injury, it was trending in that direction based on the performance that he had in the second preseason game when he had the pick 6 and the fumble recovery, but also in how he was performing in practice. And you started to see that in terms of the rep distribution. And then all of a sudden he had the injury, and then Sidney was back in there. So that to me is probably more of a position that you'll see a change at than cornerback.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about another really important piece of this defense, and that is, of course, along the trenches in Jaylen Carter. He's going into a really big year this year, Jeff, and you wrote a little bit about him earlier this week. Next year is a contract year for him. You would think that the Eagles want to get ahead of the curve when it comes to paying him. It's something that they have done with a number of their star players. And Carter, listen, is a deserving candidate for an extension. Last year, he had a 9.1% pressure rate, which was the 9th most among defensive tackles in the NFL, and tonight could be a really good test for someone like Jaylen Carter. Carter last year when he was facing off against the Dallas Cowboys was seeing a lot of Zach Martin. Now, he retired this offseason, and now we're expecting to see the number 12 overall pick out of Alabama, Tyler Booker, take his place at right guard. When you think about not only tonight's game, but just really the season as a whole for Jaylen Carter, what is the key for him to take that next step in his game and really solidify that big extension that he's due for?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard this all off season just to talk about how, yeah, he performed great in his second season, all pro bowler, got a lot of accolades for the attention that he drew from offensive lines and how that has opened up one-on-ones for other guys. But you know, there is a higher ceiling for him there. There is potential to be even greater, to be kind of mentioned. I don't want to raise the bar too high for him, but amongst the best at his position, and maybe even of all time, he has that kind of capabilities in terms of his size, his strength, and his speed, his agility. The question is, can he put that all together? Can he be focused? Can he do all the things necessary that he has to do off the field to be that type of player? He does bring, and I wrote about this, it was kind of like the main focus of my story, is just, and I think it's important. There's a nastiness, a meanness that he brings to that defensive front, to the entire unit that you want out of that position. It's historically had guys like that. I mean, Joe Green built his whole legacy on that type of play, and obviously the nickname that came with it. Jaylen doesn't quite have that fancy of a nickname yet, but what's he like, baby? No, he doesn't like Baby Rhino.
He doesn't like a bread man.
He doesn't like Baby Rhino. Likes. Yeah, no, he doesn't like that one. But yeah, so I mean, everything. He is the linchpin. He is the straw that stirs that defense, as I wrote, and you know, the big question is how's it going to happen this season, but also in this game. If we're looking specifically at the interior of the line, that's probably more the strength for the Cowboys. But, you know, Tyler Booker is a rookie. We don't know really what to expect out of him. So I imagine they're going to try their best to free Jaylen up on him one-on-one. And then if he can get free, obviously he's devastating. But if they're going to slide protection his way, then that should free things up for Mora Jomo, Nolan Smith, and Jelix Hunt on the outside.
Booker had a good preseason performance. So it'll be interesting to see how he looks in regular season action against starting caliber talent. All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the ball, particularly the Cowboys defense. And as we talk about the Cowboys defense, we will not be mentioning a very particular big name because Micah Parsons is no longer a part of this defense. He was shipped off to the Green Bay Packers in exchange for Kenny Clark and 2 first-round picks exactly 1 week ago today. Massive trade, a pretty mind-boggling trade when you think about it. The fact that, you know, Parsons has been such a dominant pass rusher since he came into the league in 2021. His 21.1% pressure rate leads the NFL since then, according to Next Gen Stats, which is, again, very staggering. However, the Cowboys did not get nothing in return for this trade. As we mentioned, the 2 draft picks, those are the big ones. And then Kenny Clark also comes over from the Packers, and I covered Clark during his tenure in Green Bay, and he was a very talented player 5-6 years ago. He is certainly on the downward trajectory right now in his career. He turns 30 next month, which is, it's crazy to say that 30 years old is old. It's not in the grand scheme of things, but in the scheme of the NFL, in the context of the NFL, it may be considered a little bit older. And yeah, he just simply was not as dominant last season in particular against the run, rushing the passer as he has been in years past. And that could be a really big boon for the Eagles' rushing attack. When you think of Saquon Barkley last year against the Cowboys, had just dominant performances against the Cowboys. In 2 games, he had 233 yards on 45 carries. When you think of not only just tonight and how Barkley could potentially fare against this Cowboys defensive front, but if you also think long-term in terms of the season, can this Eagles rushing attack be as successful or even maybe a little bit less successful, would still be a pretty good benchmark for the Eagles to try to match this season compared to last?
Yeah, I guess they'll start with this game first. I mean, look, you mentioned we're not going to mention Micah, but we are, right? I mean, it's hard to talk about the Cowboys and what they are coming into the season without mentioning their best player and how they dealt him right before the season, for reasons that I'm not entirely sure why. Run stopping, they want to be better. Run defense, I guess I don't know. I don't think that should be a priority for a defense, quite frankly. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the Eagles, that is what they specialize in based upon last year. But Kenny Clark, as you mentioned, is on the downward slide of his career, and even though he has he has hit 30, and I know when you heard that number, you were probably a little upset to hear someone describe it that way with a 30-year-old 30th birthday coming up. But for those of us over 50, 30 is still young. And maybe he can kind of, find the fountain of youth in that defensive front. But that being said, I don't know. They went out and got a linebacker. I don't know how good he is in a run stop. I mean, the numbers you look on him are not great. Kenneth Murray. DeMarcus Lawrence is probably their best run defender across the line. He's gone. There's an opportunity for the Eagles here in this game to really kind of do it like they did last year. Now, I expect teams to stack an extra guy in that box to try and stop Saquon, and I imagine the Cowboys are looking at this matchup and thinking, okay, this is what we got to do, right? Number one, run offense versus the 29th ranked pass offense. What are we going to do to stop them? Let's try and ground Saquon Barkley, but as we saw in the Super Bowl, that didn't go quite so well for the Chiefs. Jalen Hurts burnt them with his arm at times. When you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, and Jahan Dotson, who's taken a little bit of a step this offseason, that's going to be tough to do. And then you factor in Jalen's ability to run the ball, and that's kind of the X factor, I think, for this offense. So we'll see how this all plays out over the course of the season. It's going to be a marathon. It's going to be a grind. It's going to be dependent upon how the defenses play them week to week. But in this game, if I'm looking specifically at it, I think there's a chance for Barkley to go off.
Well, we can't talk about the Eagles' run game without talking about the offensive line. And a key member of that offensive line is Landon Dickerson. He is active. He is available to play in today's game after dealing with multiple injuries this offseason. Of course, first there was the meniscus injury just 3 weeks ago. He had meniscus surgery in his right knee, was back at practice within a week and a half, 2 weeks. We did not see Landon out there at practice on Monday, and that was because he sustained a different injury, a back injury. That is what kept him out of that practice. However, he was able to come back the following day and practice as a full participant. When we did not see Dickerson out there, it was Brett Toth again at left guard, who took snaps at that same spot in the starting spot back in training camp when Dickerson was also out. So let's talk about Dickerson for a second, because I think obviously he has dealt with a number of injuries throughout his college career, throughout his NFL career. Guys have said that he is made of rubber. I think that is really the only the only answer here, perhaps, because he comes back so quickly. He is so tough. When you think about the short-term and long-term implications of a meniscus injury, and particularly meniscus surgery, where it doesn't seem like they did the full surgery, otherwise he would be out for the entire year. What is your concern level for Dickerson and how he'll be able to stay healthy or not throughout the entire season, not just for week one?
Well, I mean, I'm going off what the Eagles are telling me behind the scenes, not super concerned, but I mean, look, you don't have to rattle off all the injuries. He's had a rash of them over his career, dating back to college, and has had multiple surgeries. So the knees, the ankles, they're an issue. Now, this back thing, from what I understand, it's just kind of like a thing that sprung up out of nowhere, and it does, for what I was told, for big guys, and that does happen occasionally. Now, backs are tricky. Cam Jurgens, as we know, had to have surgery this offseason to alleviate nerve pain in his back. So you're worried about that as well. But you're worried about Lane Johnson at age 35, and you're worried about Jordan Mailata at 6'8", 370. So these guys, they play through a lot, and they're tough. And you're going to have some injuries this season. What the Eagles have done over the last several years is mitigate those injuries by preparing their backups to come in game or two and get the job done. The issue is when you have mass casualties along the line, and you have guys gone for an extended period, then that's when it really tests the depth of the offensive line. And quite frankly, I don't know where the Eagles stand in that regard. I don't know if they're as deep They went out and got Fred Johnson to be the swing tackle, so that kind of addressed it a little bit. It looks like Breck Toth is going to be probably the backup center in this game. They didn't dress Drew. They're not dressing Drew Kendall. Maybe Dickerson can slide over and do center. That didn't go so well in the NFC Championship, but it could be potentially something that they're worried about. And getting back to your original question with Landon Dickerson, he has a history.
Absolutely. Jeff, I think Jalen Hurts must have looked around at one point during training camp and been like, where is everybody? Where are all of my guys? Because, Landon Dickerson wasn't out there. And then A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith weren't out there for long swaths of time during training camp. They were dealing, A.J. Brown with a hamstring injury, Devontae Smith with a groin injury by the end of camp, and they only practiced in full 3 times together over the summer. That said, both Brown and Smith were back at practice this week. They were not listed at all on the injury report, indicating that they were full participants, were not hampered at all by their injuries. When you look at how this Eagles passing attack could potentially match up against the Cowboys secondary, this is a pretty thin group, specifically at cornerback. You've got Trayvon Diggs coming off of knee surgery. We don't know exactly what he is going to look like. Deron Bland, he's healthy, and he's coming off of just signing a very big contract extension. And then Khair Elam is coming also into this Cowboys group. He was in Buffalo for the last 3 seasons, was not a full-time starter there, but now he's the likely starting outside corner opposite Diggs. And then behind that group, Jeff, the Cowboys don't have a lot there. So if there are any injuries, that could be a big concern for them. How do you feel like this passing attack could potentially exploit some of the deficiencies in the secondary going into tonight's game?
Yeah, so Diggs was kind of a question mark heading into the game because of the knee surgery. So he's going to play. I don't know if he's 100%. So as you mentioned, the depth is an issue there. So if he gets hurt, what happens? I'm just going to go on the assumption that he's going to be able to play. Diggs is a good cornerback. Does he get as many interceptions as he did previously? I think the 1 year he had 11. No, but he's a threat, right? And you just have to be careful. Now, he's a guy that's susceptible to double moves, and I think Bland kind of falls under that same category. He's another guy, big play guy. I think a couple of years ago he had 5 interceptions returned for touchdowns. So you have to be careful. But I do think because of the aggressive way in which they play, there are opportunities downfield for A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And, just get back to that Micah Parsons guy. If those guys have to be in the secondary, covering guys for longer than 1, 2, 3 seconds because no one's getting home, then there's really nothing they can do. It's going to be on the Cowboys' pressure and lack thereof.
Lots of interesting storylines going into tonight's game. Just a reminder, guys, before we get into our player picks for today, you can be a part of our conversation if you're over on YouTube, Facebook, X, wherever you may be. You can drop us a question in the chat, and we will answer some of those throughout the remainder of our show. But, Jeff, let's talk about some of those player picks. We've talked about a lot of players so far. However, if there is one that you're intrigued a little bit by in today's game for whatever reason, I'm curious, who would it be?
Well, I'm talking about the Cowboys' pressure, just as important on that other side of the ball with the Eagles. Look, this defense is a little different under Vic Fangio. It's not the penetrating 4-man front where you're really hanging your hat on that. You're always hanging defensive front, I think, in today's NFL because of how passing offenses have taken over. Nolan Smith's my guy because he's had a quiet summer. I think he had a little bit of a shoulder thing. He had the triceps coming off that. So I think maybe they dialed him back a little bit there. He had a concussion in camp. Now he has to go up against Lane Johnson a bunch, so that sometimes explains why he doesn't produce as much in training camp. He took a giant leap in his second season after kind of a quiet rookie year. So the Eagles entrusted him with this number 1 job, but that's another leap up for him in terms of responsibility, in terms of being the guy that defenses are going to focus on, because Jelix Hunt is young and there's being more asked of him as well. My question with Nolan Smith, big picture, is like, can he consistently do it against these NFL tackles? Some of his sacks they're a little bit of fortuitous, and quite frankly, that's fine when you have Jaylen Carter, but there are times he's going to have to win his one-on-ones. They need him to get home to win his one-on-one. So I'll be focused on him and how he does. The Cowboys do not have very good tackles. from what I understand, I guess, is Tyler Guyton. Is he active? If he's active, I mean, that could be he could be Nolan Smith could be licking his chops if he lines up on that right side versus him.
Mm-hmm. Paul Can over on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day asks, will the Eagles rush be able to disrupt the Cowboys passing game tonight? And Jeff, to your point, given the fact that the Cowboys' strength is on the interior, that could mean Nolan Smith could go feasting potentially, or a Jalix Hunt, or Josh Uche was someone that we saw flashes of in training camp, and we'll see if that's able to translate here in the regular season as well. So we'll see how that all pans out. And then on the other side of it, I am also going along the trenches as well for the Eagles defense. I'm picking Moro Ojomo, and as I just kind of contradict myself about the strength of this Cowboys offensive line being on the interior, I'm curious to see if we start to see some of those flashes, or not even but continue to see those flashes from Moro Ojomo that he showed in the Super Bowl and continue to show in training camp when it comes to his pass rushing ability. Jaylen Carter, as we've mentioned, is someone who is known for drawing double teams, and we saw Milton Williams last season really benefit from that, ultimately racking up some sacks, generating pressure, and then turning that into a big payday with the New England Patriots in free agency. Now, the Eagles are going to need more contributions alongside Carter, and Ojomo is the next logical person stepping up into that role that Milton Williams once held. And, of course, Jordan Davis trying to step in and develop more as a pass rusher as well, dropping some weight in the offseason, and the Eagles seem high on his potential, even though this is a conversation it feels like we have every offseason with Jordan Davis. But perhaps something is going to be different. We'll see. But Ojomo is someone I'm really intrigued by, someone I'm really interested to see play this season, and we'll see if he is able to get off to a good start tonight. All right, let us flip it over to our predictions, Jeff. It's time to dust off the crystal ball at long last and make our predictions. What is your final score for tonight's game?
Yeah, I have the Eagles winning relatively comfortably, 30-17. What are they, 7.5-point favorites? So this would be
I think it might
a
be
cover.
more.
Is it more than that? I guess when the Parsons
be.
thing happened, maybe
Yeah.
it went even up higher, which is understandable. Look, I know that the difference between any NFL team is really minuscule when it comes down to any team can be beaten on any given Thursday. Excuse the rephrasing. But the Cowboys are just, I don't know. I just wonder how they are post Micah Parsons trade. And then when you look at the personnel defensively, it just isn't what it used to be. And then I include the offensive line in that. Now, look, CeeDee Lamb is going to be a tough assignment for whoever's lined up opposite him. We didn't even mention the possibility that Quinyon Mitchell follows him. I don't think that's probably likely because there's a lot of CeeDee Lamb in the slot. And we mentioned briefly what George Pickens could do versus Adoree Jackson, whatever safety that they're attacking in the post. I mean, trust me, they got Sidney Brown circled. This is a guy that hasn't been there much, and if it's Andrew Mukuba in that position, they're going to go at him, or they should. So there are ways that the Eagles can lose this game. There's no doubt about it. I just think that the overall strength of this team. I should mention real quickly too the fact that the Eagles didn't play together. You mentioned it briefly. But the fact that the first unit offense didn't play together much and didn't look great at times during camp. So there are those concerns. And sometimes it takes, as we saw last year, it takes weeks to get to where you're going to be, where you want to be. And that can all happen in this first week. All that being said, all those qualifiers, I still stick by the 30-17 score that I predicted. I think the Eagles will win this game.
Jeff, for the reasons why you are concerned about this Eagles team, I have it being a little bit closer of a margin. Still a win for the Eagles, 27-20. I think the fact that the Cowboys have Dak Prescott back there, they did not get to see them. The Eagles never saw Prescott last season as he was out injured for the majority of last year. I think that is going to be a big boost, of course, for this Cowboys offense. And if then you add in a new offensive weapon like George Pickens to complement the CeeDee Lamb, the Jake Ferguson, I think that this could potentially be a more competent Cowboys offense than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for, especially given the fact that the Eagles have some differences, some big changes in the secondary and some potential holes that they could exploit. We'll see how Sidney Brown fares. We'll see how Adoree Jackson fares, as you mentioned. But that's my big question. I don't know how some of these players are going to look going up against a pretty proficient Cowboys passing attack. And if they're able to pass that test, I think they should feel good about themselves going forward. But for those reasons, as I mentioned, I'm keeping it close for this one, 27-20, relatively close. It's still not that close, but 27-20, a little bit closer than some of the blowout predictions that I've seen out there and that you're predicting, Jeff. All right, everyone, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining Inquirer Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. As always, we will be over on Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day, chatting with all of you, answering your questions. So if we weren't able to get to you today, please head on over there. We will be with you throughout the game, and I'll see you over there.
And if you want even more Eagles insights, please check out my podcast, Uncovering the Birds, where I take you behind the scenes each week with reporting, interviews, and everything you might have missed about your favorite team. I also have some exciting news. We're going to have 2 episodes per week, one the day after the game and another later in the week. So you can listen to Uncovering the Birds at Inquirer.com/podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Once again, that is all for us today, everyone. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.